Hi, everyone. I'm just going to give it 1 or 2 minutes to allow people to log in. Thanks to everybody who's already signed in today. Okay, so according to my watch, we've just clicked over the 2 minutes past the hour. So I think that's a good time to go and get started. Thank you very much, everyone, for attending today. And thank you to anybody and hello to anybody who is watching the recording at a later date. My name is Jo Hare, and I'm the Associate Director for Academic Engagement at the University of Sydney. And I'm also a member of the International Federation of Library Associations and Institutions Academic and Research Libraries section, and I'm very happy to be hosting this webinar today about engagement-centred models in Australian academic libraries. In Australia, it's customary to begin events with an acknowledgement of country. This is a way of recognising the traditional owners of the land we're meeting on and paying respect to First Nations people. It's a standard and respectful protocol used at meetings, events, ceremonies, those kinds of things. And it usually includes naming the specific nation or language groups whose land we are on. So before we begin, I would like to acknowledge country. I'm joining you today from Wallumattagal land. The Wallumattagal people are part of the Darug Nation, the First Nations custodians of this area of what is now called Sydney. I acknowledge that this is unceded land, and I would like to pay my respect to elders past and present. Today's session focuses on relationship building, partnerships, and connection, and these ideas aren't new. First Nations people have practiced deep, sustained relationships and knowledge sharing for tens of thousands of years, and I would like to acknowledge and share my respect for that practice as we come together for this conversation today. If you would like, please share in the chat the land that you are joining from today. And I extend this acknowledgement and respect to the traditional owners of the lands that you all are on and to First Nations people joining us today. Now I'll just cover a few practical details before I introduce our panelists. Today's session will be about 40 or 45 minutes long, and we will have time for questions at the end. To ask a question, please use the question and answer feature in Zoom to post your questions. And please feel free to use the chat function to talk to other attendees. I have two colleagues joining me today, Joel, Nikolai, and Phoebe Adams, who are both senior engagement librarians in my team at the University of Sydney. They're here to back me up with any technical support, any technical glitches, so they might jump into the chat to help out if need be. And a reminder that the session today is being recorded. The session is brought to you by the Academic and Research Libraries section of IFLA. The International Federation of Library Associations and Institutions, or IFLA, is the global voice for the library and information profession. Within IFLA, the Academic and Research Libraries section, which is known as ARL, brings together library professionals working in universities and research settings. The group focuses on sharing ideas, practical experience, and emerging practice across academic and research libraries worldwide. And one of ARL's core activities is its webinar program. which is what we're here today doing. So why are we having this session? Why are we here today and what are we talking about? This session sits within a period of ongoing change across Australian higher education. In Australia, international students play a significant role in university funding models, as international students' numbers have fluctuated in recent years in response to COVID, travel restrictions, and changes in government. Universities are thinking carefully about sustainability and resourcing. That has brought renewed attention to how teaching, learning, and student support are structured at scale. At a national level, we also have the Universities Accord, which is an Australian government review of the higher education system. It was launched in 2022 to set a long-term direction for Australian universities with an emphasis on student success, teaching quality, and workforce sustainability. Implementation of the Accord is still unfolding, but it's already shaping the conversation about what universities should prioritise and how work is organised around that. Alongside this, TEQSA, that's TEQSA, the Tertiary Education Quality and Standards Agency. This is Australia's higher education regulator, and its recent work has placed stronger emphasis on assurance of learning at the course level. So what this means is that universities are increasingly expected to be able to demonstrate how learning outcomes are taught and assessed and reviewed over time, including how teaching and assessment are responding to the use of generative artificial intelligence. So it's in this context, changing student cohorts, changing student numbers, shifting government and regulator priorities, that it has become important for academic libraries to be strategically positioned within a university. That means aligning library work clearly with university strategy and seeking to partner with faculties and central units to support delivery on shared priorities. For many libraries, and we'll talk about this today, this has meant building on a traditional service provider model towards one that focuses on understanding partner needs and working alongside them. To reflect the range of approaches emerging across the Australian sector, I'm thrilled to be joined today by colleagues from different institutions and contexts. Joining us today, we have Dr. Gary Pearce from Monash University, Director of Academic Services. We have Eva Fisch, Manager of Library Outreach and Engagement, also from Monash University. We have Danielle Johnson, Director, Library Services, Outreach and Scholarly Services at Deakin University, and Loretta Atkinson, Senior Manager, Faculty Services Librarian Team at the University of Queensland. I'd also just like to say a special thank you to Julie Oates, Associate Director for Faculty Services at the University of Queensland, who contributed to the development of the webinar but is unable to join us today. So today's session, it's going to be conversational. I'll be asking some few questions and asking the panelists to share their experiences. And I might also share some experiences from my workplace at the University of Sydney, where we have also shifted to an engagement model focused on building connection and relationships across the university. Before we get into the discussion, I think it would be helpful to have a sense of how these university libraries have developed and positioned their engagement roles. So here you have a very, very brief snapshot of each institution. I won't go through all of the detail here, but for each institution, you can see the year in which they adopted their engagement model, some figures giving you a sense of the size of the institution in terms of their staff numbers and student numbers, and then a brief sort of summary of how their engagement models are structured. So you'll see that all of the institutions have shifted to this model in the last 3 to 4 years, with Monash and the University of Sydney formally adopting the model just last year in 2025. The main point I want to sort of draw your attention to here is that the engagement models look quite different across the 4 libraries. There's a lot of variation in the number of roles that are specifically dedicated to engagement. These roles differ in levels of seniority and where they sit within the library's organisational structure. In some cases, engagement work is concentrated in a small number of senior positions, and in others, it's distributed across a larger team. There are also differences in who the engagement roles seek to partner with. So some roles are focused on partnering with academic staff, while others focus on professional staff. or both. These numbers do exclude managers and leadership roles, and they don't capture specialist or discipline-aligned teams that also contribute significantly to engagement work. And I can share, for example, at the University of Sydney, engaging with university partners is represented in many different roles across the library, but these numbers represent roles specifically aligned with faculty engagement. So with that snapshot, let's start the conversation. I might stop sharing my screen just so it's easier to see everybody's faces. And thank you very much to our panelists. So my first question is, and I might throw this one to Gary to get us started. Looking back, what were the main drivers behind your library adopting your engagement model?
Thanks for that, Jo. The main drivers really, we went through a wider portfolio change. So my portfolio, academic services, and the drivers around that broader change were to be more strategically focused, to be scalable, and to be responsive to the needs and opportunities within the university. So we, as part of that, we created a new library business partner team, and part of that as part of the broader change within academic services. And that broader change saw some creation of education and research support service teams along with that library business partner team. In effect, we separated out outreach and engagement from service development and delivery. So I guess in our context, it's hard to speak about this without thinking about that broader change that we undertook. Now, the creation of that team devoted to outreach and engagement, their broad responsibilities were building high-level strategic partnerships with the faculties, informing library alignment with education and research priorities, identifying strategic opportunities for the library to support faculties, communicating library vision and strategy to the university, and brokering and making connections with library services.
Thank you, Gary. Danielle, did you want to share a little bit?
Yeah, quite a similar story to Gary, I guess. In 2022, Deakin Library underwent an operating model and organisational restructure late 2022, and so the development of our library partner positions stemmed from that, and it was really all about thinking about how our library can deliver on its library plan at that stage, 2022 to 2025, really positioning the library at the centre of the university and strengthening that role. It was so our roles were quite senior roles. And in fact, at the time, there was some debate about what the reporting lines should look like for those library partners. At one stage, it was sort of flagged that potentially they could report directly to the university librarian. That didn't happen, and they report to me as part of outreach and scholarly services. But they are senior roles, and were designed to work at a level across the institution with senior leaders from faculties and divisions, associate deans of teaching and learning, associate deans of research, heads of school, directors across the university. So sort of positioned at quite a high level, and really bringing that library vision into the conversations across the institution, working across sort of, I guess, 4 key areas. So sort of relationship management, advocacy, knowledge brokering, and doing that needs assessment and gap analysis between what we were delivering through our services and what our institution actually need, and really making sure that we were very, very strategically aligned and maximising that kind of value that the library brings into our institution.
Thank you, Danielle. Yeah, definitely lots of commonalities there. Loretta, would you like to share a little bit of the experience of the University of Queensland?
Thanks, Jo. Probably a very similar story. The main driver at UQ Library for the change was it was designed to maximise the library's value to the university. So the intention was to position the library and librarians to become equal partners with academics and to work together on strategic priorities. Along with this, there was an intention to create expertise across the team to be able to provide scalability to what we deliver and to be able to be responsive. And that was rather than having work sit with an individual, which was probably mostly the case under our previous model. So we've created the outreach librarian model. It commenced in 2022 after an 18-month transition, and it is supported by a team of learning and research librarians and other specialist teams as well.
Great, thank you. Yeah, it's interesting you're talking about that shift towards positioning librarians or library staff as equal partners. I think that's quite a significant change in the last sort of 5 years or so that we're seeing. So thank you, Loretta. I might ask my next question, and we're talking about partnership and connection. And I'd like to ask if there's a particular partnership or an example that really stands out as working well in your context for these engagement models. And perhaps Gary and Eva, you'd like to speak to something from Monash.
I might let Eva go first. She hasn't spoken yet.
Thanks, Gary. I think Gary's going to talk about some of the big ticket partnerships around OERs, but I wanted to talk about just a little practical example that illustrates something that the library business partners have been able to achieve by being out there liaising with, finding out what's going on in the faculty. So this is around a set of honours theses that the library had, and at the time the library was reconsidering how it managed its theses, including honours theses. And so at the same time, the faculty was talking about alumni engagement and bringing alumni in, as many universities are doing. And while we were thinking about kind of the discarding of our theses, we were able to change the narrative and present this moving the theses management to the faculty. This is in law. So they would manage the theses, but then they would be able to combine that with a whole series of outreach and engagement that they were doing to faculty members to try and build, I guess, connection and fundraising out to the law community. And what they were thinking of doing, or what was pitched to them, was using theses as a way of connecting. So now we have a win-win situation with the library no longer having 1,000 honours theses. They've been moved over to law, and law having a really exciting new program of connection, and seeing the library as a kind of positive partner in that space. But Gary has some other more transformative examples, I think.
So I'll just mention very quickly. So we have, as a lot of libraries have, engaged our faculties around OERs, and that engagement predates the adoption of the current model, but was led by our managers and was something we drew on in developing the current model. So it's involved that high-level engagement with the faculties around EDI issues, mentioning the role of OERs in fostering student equity. It addresses a pain point for the library around textbook provision and aligns with the priorities, as I say, around equity. That led to some work around the creation of an OER grant system, service provision, local capacity building within our teams in the library. So that's a bit of an ongoing conversation taken up by our library business partners. One faculty-specific example since we've instituted the model was around the medicine, nursing and health sciences faculty. There was a discussion with the library business partner around Indigenous student engagement with the library, covering a range of issues and some follow-up work again with our new service teams. So the faculty kept their own collection of resources, which led to a discussion around OERs, such as anatomy resources relevant to Indigenous people. There was some discussion around metadata and connected with a review of the collection and support we developed in supporting our users finding material in the collection. There were questions of Indigenous research methods and how these could be incorporated into library workshops, and then a discussion around the issue of belonging and subsequent inclusion of library in an induction program. So that was a really kind of positive conversation initiated by one of our library business partners.
Thank you, Gary. Thank you, Eva. And what I heard from both of those is talk about collections as well. And I think for the University of Sydney, this approach to really seeking to understand faculty needs when we're talking about making changes to our collection, whether that's been physical collections like you were talking, reducing the physical space, but also our online collections, that deeper understanding of what the faculty's perspectives are has been really helpful in that work. Danielle, did you want to add something there?
I had a couple.
Yeah.
I think something a little bit different, I guess. Last year, Deakin Library led work across the institution to develop an open scholarship position statement for our institution, and the role of the library partners was really pivotal in that work across faculties in terms of engagement with faculties, socialising that draft statement, working with them about what that means and what in practice. It was really important. Our partners developed workshop programs to run in faculty. They supported our Director of Information in terms of making those connections into senior faculty leaders to talk about that open scholarship position statement. And I think the success of that was a real demonstration of the value of having those senior engagement roles with those connections into faculty, being able to get us a seat at the table and also kind of lead those conversations. We've also had some really good, I actually asked our partners about this and some of the things that they thought were successful. One of the observations they made is we've had experiences where we've enriched our existing practice because of the partner role. So, for example, we develop many different forms of digital literacy modules and so on. We work with faculties often in that space and schools in that space. And we've had opportunities arise where because we've got a partner sitting with one across a couple of faculties, they've seen an opportunity to translate what we've done for one faculty into another faculty. So they're getting scalability in what we do. And I'm thinking particularly of an example with digital literacy modules that were developed specifically with our School of Engineering, our Faculty of Science, Engineering and Built Environment, which then the partner recognised actually could be used for our Faculty of Health. And so being able to then negotiate between two faculties to use essentially the same type of content, really improve scalability and the reach of the work that we do. So it was a very specific example, I think, where we've had real benefits out of having someone with visibility across multiple faculties, because our partners, as you said at the start, Jo, we only have 3 of them. So 2 of our partners kind of maintain relationships with 2 faculties each, and our 3rd partner is responsible for sort of more of our divisional and professional staff relationships. So that cross-sectional visibility that they have across those faculties is really beneficial in connecting up those dots and taking advantage of opportunities that to spread across schools or faculties or courses.
Danielle, I'm going to get in touch with you again after this webinar because we're trying to do something similar but the reverse, scale a Faculty of Medicine and Health digital literacy module to science and engineering. So it'll be really interesting.
Great. Yep.
Interesting to
we have that conversation.
That'll be really good. And a similar thing, I don't know that we would have identified that opportunity if we didn't have somebody working at that higher level across multiple faculties. Loretta, would love to hear from you, an example at UQ.
Thanks, Jo. I can actually think of a lot of examples, but the one I will mention is a collaboration that we have at UQ with the Health, Medicine and Behavioural Sciences faculty. They have an educational alliance with Metro North STARS, which is the Surgical Treatment and Rehabilitation Service, which is a hospital based on our Hurston campus. And the librarians have been embedded in research groups there. So they work in groups that are referred to as CAT groups. It's critically appraised topic groups, and those groups will include researchers, clinicians, sometimes consumers and librarians, and the idea is to form a connection between research and clinical practice. So the process involves developing a clinical question, one that is structured and is answerable, and then searching and critically appraising the best evidence, and then providing a summary of that evidence, which is the clinical bottom line. And those findings are then put into, or they will inform clinical practice. So it also contributes to quality improvement and research. It benefits UQ, it benefits STARS and healthcare more broadly as well. The librarian's role is to refine the specific question and provide rapid search results. This work did commence slightly before our change, but it was a direction that we knew that we wanted to go in, and now it's just part of the role that our outreach librarians will do. It's a good example of a partnership project, and there's been quite a bit of interest in it from other areas as well.
It's a great example because it's taking it outside the university context as well. Like you said, it's improving healthcare outcomes. So yeah, wonderful. Thank you. So I think each of you probably touched on it a little bit in your responses there, but I wanted to ask what approaches you or your teams have found effective in connecting with and building relationships with stakeholders. Danielle, maybe did you want to talk to that?
I think so. Our model's been in place for just on 3 years now, and I guess what I would observe over that time is that consistency is really important. So just showing up, our partners show up every single day for the last 3 years in faculty teaching and learning committees, in faculty research committees, in working groups, in a vast range of fora that exist, and doing that consistently over time, just showing up, is what it really builds trust and connection, because that's really what the partner role is all about, building connection with people in the institution. And that takes time. It is a slow burn. So it takes time to learn the culture of the place that you're going into. It takes time to build connections and relationships. But I look back now over the last 3 years, and I now see an institution that for many, many parts, not all of them, but for most parts of the institution, they would question why the library wasn't at the table, or why isn't the library there now? Whereas 3 years ago, that may not have even occurred to them to have someone, represent from the library. They've gotten so accustomed to having library voice day in, day out in the work that they do, that's really strengthened that relationship and that understanding of where our shared goals are. So I think for me, that's really important. Just that daily grind of building connection through showing up wherever you can possibly get, a hook in the door, and then it just becomes quite normalized over time.
Eva and Gary from Monash, is there something you'd like to share?
Sure. So I'll just comment that when Eva and I briefed the faculty leadership about the new model, and we're newer to this than Deakin are, but during those briefings at the beginning of last year, the response was really positive across the board, with invitations into the different committees in the faculties and a strong willingness to engage about a range of library-related issues. Those faculty leaderships understood the role of the library business partner almost immediately, and their role around understanding faculty priorities, the library business partner role around connecting faculty in the service areas and bringing focus on library priorities and vision to the faculty areas. So I think those engagements with those leadership groups last year was important in laying the groundwork for the business partners. I must say a couple of other things that I noticed were the usefulness of the business partner title itself in terms of its recognition and resonance within the university with those faculty leaders, and of course emphasising our own experience and traditions, if you like, of outreach and engagement that we would bring to that role. We felt it important to signal in a strong way that this was different from previous models of engagement. And the roles engagement at the faculty leadership level has also been an important part that's been mentioned a few times in this discussion, really engaging at that leadership level and taking that approach within the education and research committees in particular.
I might just add to what Gary said and to what Danielle said, because Danielle made some really good points about showing up builds trust. But another technique that's really important is the value add that we can bring as library professional librarians and as library business partners. We bring a perspective and a sense of partnership and engagement that I think faculties see as, I guess, providing some other options for their strategic plans, other areas of partnership that they hadn't maybe originally thought of. I just wanted to say that we kicked off this program and this new model in 2025. And at the beginning of 2026, so just a month ago, Gary and I sent an email to all the faculty stakeholders that we had originally contacted, because we wanted to tell them some of the successes in the year that had, in 2025. And there were some changes in library business partner alignments and personnel that we wanted to announce. So we weren't expecting this, but we have had quite a lot of really interesting responses from stakeholders themselves. So this is some anecdotal. I'm going to try and keep the names of the business partners somewhat secret. Because of confidentiality reasons. But some faculty deans and general managers and senior stakeholders said how glad they were to have their business partner continue to be their business partner because of the value that business partner had brought in things like discussions of graduate research needs, a model that's changing at Monash, input on access to resources for researchers and PhD students, updates on the read and publish agreements, updates on open access, updates on Indigenous initiatives that the library is doing, and library support for systematic reviews. Others emailed us back wanting to know how other faculties were leveraging the library business model so they could, do some imitation, I guess. So I guess it's interesting to see how that position works from the side of from the other side. I might give over to others that may want to mention something.
I was just going to reiterate that actually, Eva, because that's one of the things that I think has been a real success in the model for us as well, is that recognition and respect that the partners have particularly within the faculties, not only, but I'm thinking of some particular faculty examples, and the feedback that we've consistently got from various faculty teams is that gratitude for having someone like a partner to work with. And in fact, I think one of the most telling things is two of the faculty teams that our partners work with talked about our library partners as being part of their team and seeing them as part of their team. So it was this idea that it's not, they're deeply embedded in the work that those faculties are doing, and they are team members and they're seen that way, and they're invited into the working groups and project teams as subject matter experts as part of a team. And I think that's really telling when you're seen as a team, not as part of a team, as opposed to being sort of on the outside looking in and providing advice when you're asked to do so. So I think that's been incredibly successful in terms of the way that our partners have been accepted by the institution. So I'd agree with that.
That's wonderful to hear, you've been in the model now for a couple of years, Danielle, but it's still quite recent. So that must have been wonderful for your partners to hear that they're considered part of the team. And similarly for the team at Monash to get that feedback so early on is really encouraging. Not just for for the model itself and its implementation, but for the individuals that are in those roles. Thank you, Eva, for sharing that feedback, and I hope your team has heard it as well. Loretta, did you have something you wanted to add?
I guess I can just build on what's been said about being consistent and showing up. I think it's really important to build those relationships in that way. One outreach librarian said to me not long ago that an academic had said to them, "You're everywhere I go. Everywhere I go, I see you." And I thought that was good feedback. We should be where academics are. We should be seen as being part of their team. I think what helped with that too, we really tried hard to give autonomy to our team to be proactive and to create those relationships with key staff. It wasn't always with academic staff. It could be with learning designers, research managers, school managers. And it's really that has opened the doors for librarians to be invited to things like staff retreats, school meetings, planning days. It's an opportunity for them to be there at the start of conversations, which is really important.
I would say for the University of Sydney as well, we've had some success with partnering with, I guess you would call them professional teams within the faculty. So maybe learning design teams that sit within a faculty. We're sort of perhaps more traditionally aligned, and then those teams can say, well, you should be at this meeting or you should be at this committee as well. So yeah, that's worked well for us as well. So we've talked about sort of the model broadly. I'd like to learn a little bit more about how it's working for your teams. And Loretta, perhaps I'll throw this question to you first, since you've been there a little bit longer. How did you support staff to understand and settle into their new roles, and what worked well?
So at UQ, we had a very long transition period. It was over 18 months. So there was an announcement about the transition. We held a series of workshops about what would be the way forward from the liaison librarian model, which was our previous model. We got staff involved in identifying our areas of work and what needed to be scaled up, what was complex, what do we need to work on more. We then gave our team the opportunity to get involved in building that future. So we had 10 separate strands of work. They covered a whole range of service delivery, things such as research support, teaching, academic program support, and a few enablers to help deliver that service as well. So staff were involved in the process and the direction of the new ways of working. I think that worked well. One of the exercises that went a long way to help understand the role was we did a day in the life exercise. It went a long way for them helping to understand how to work in that role day to day, rather than always talking about the high level strategic objectives. I think also we gave autonomy to the staff to get involved with this, and we deliberately tried to build a team early on. And I think that really helped create a good way forward for everyone. But it was a long process, probably not something I'd recommend again. Maybe a bit too long.
I would say that the work that you did early on when the University of Sydney was shifting or moving towards shifting an engagement model, the team from UQ did a webinar for our teams to help us understand that day in the life. So the work was very valuable, and we still talk about those sessions. So thank you. Danielle, did you want to talk a little bit about how you helped
Loretta? Yeah, Loretta, I feel like your 12 to 18 month transition period isn't long. It feels like for us, it's been a 3-year transition period. It really does feel like we're just kind of, and maybe it's just me, maybe everyone else in the library, everyone else in the institution gets it and has got it for a long time. But certainly for me, it feels like it has been sort of a long transition period, and lots of work done over the past sort of 2 or 3, particularly the first 2 years, around what is the service model, what are we doing here, who are our key stakeholders, who are the partners we care about the most at this point in time, and what does that relationship look like. So a lot of work and a lot of looking inwards at what that model looks like is really hard. It's a hard slog to kind of do that, and I feel like we've kind of come out of the first couple of years, and it feels like it's really starting to hum. And I think that probably harks also back to that idea of the slow burn, that it takes time to build relationships and to build that trust and connection. So you see that come to fruition over a longer period of time. I think in terms of what worked well for the roles, without putting words into the partners' mouths, I think despite all the, some of the lack of clarity around the roles themselves and the fact that the rest of the library was also going through really significant transition, I think letting the partners, they're senior roles, right? They are very senior roles within our library, letting them just get on with the business of making those connections, identifying the opportunities, and just get them rolling on that. I think that was really important while we're still trying to sort out what the rest of the operating model looks like, what the structure across the library model looks like. We're trying to fill, all sorts of recruitment gaps across the library. Just letting those senior roles get on and do their advocacy work, build those relationships where they see the best opportunities, and just giving them that space to do that. I think that is really important. You do run the risk of staying in a holding pattern, waiting for everything to be perfect and to know exactly what that relationship should look like and who should do what and where do you hand off to someone else in the library. You can find yourself getting a bit stuck. So just giving them sort of that space to just get on with the business and trusting them to do that. That's what they're there to do. So, yeah.
And the institution it's going to continue its business. So you have to be sort of rapidly
responding.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Gary, I saw you unmute. Did you want to jump in?
Sure. So I'd just say that the broader change that we went through in our portfolio involved the creation of 3 new manager roles around education support, research support, and Eva's position around library outreach and engagement. And those roles have been really important, I think, in leading strategically in those respective areas and giving a clear sense of direction for those areas. The other thing I'd say is that our portfolio's been under a sort of a journey around new ways of working, involving agile ways of working. So people will know that agile involves the thinking carefully about the visual representation of the work, setting operating rhythms, cycles of work, and involvement of our staff members in planning and prioritization of work. So I think that's been a really useful journey for us, just in terms of support for staff, setting some clear directions via Eva and I have developed updated recently a new library plan and roadmap for outreach and engagement, which places our senior leadership team at the center of that outreach and engagement space. But of course, our library business partners are the ones whose position is mainly dedicated to that outreach and engagement task. I think it's also important. It's also been important for us to think about how the senior leadership team supports the library business partners, and that's been a bit of an ongoing conversation, and we've developed some processes around that. For us, the process of change was relatively short compared, listening to others' experience. We moved to the new model over 3 months, and we did that very deliberately. Our library had undergone a broader change in 2021, and we were a little bit cautious about people feeling change fatigue over an extended kind of experience of change. And then we recruited the library business partners over the course of a year, because of course this is a relatively new type of position for the profession. And we were certain we needed to get the right people into those positions. And Eva can probably talk a little bit about how we supported the library business partners as we recruited them into those positions.
Yeah, I'm thinking of how to elaborate on what Gary said meaningfully. So it's probably worth remembering that at Monash, we by and large recruited outside of Monash. So people were coming into those business partner roles, possibly not even from an academic library background. And yet we were expecting those individuals to work with faculties on some really big paradigm changes in our profession, or in the university, like open access and like textbook provision and print to e-textbooks and OERs, things that people who may not be working in an academic sector library or even may not be librarians may not understand some of the nuances. So in in that first year, in 2025, last year, the university librarian and the very senior members of our strategic senior leadership team, so our directors, participated with the library business partners in some 10 discussions or roundtables on some of those big hot topics that I've just mentioned, read and publish and open access and green repositories and so on and so forth. And that has subsequently morphed, if I can use that word, into a tool that we've developed that is a strategic communications tool where we've actually documented some of the talking points and pain points and key things that we want our library business partners to be very fluent in when they talk to the stakeholders and other people in the faculties and in the university. So I'm proud to say that after, I don't know, 5 months, 6 months, that tool is almost completed. This year, each of our library business partners, and we do have some new ones, has been writing a faculty engagement plan. And that has meant that we have had to join the dots on what normal business as usual promotions we do in the library out to the university, things like, I guess, open day and orientation in our classes and seminars and open access week. So the things we normally talk about and the kinds of campaigns that we're running. So the library business partners are also in many ways are change agents out in the faculties. So also what sort of change programs that we are going to work on this year. Two of the ones that we're going to be working on, or anyway, one that I can talk about is our textbook provision. So working with the library business partners on how that will work in their faculty, how they'll include that in their faculty engagement plan. I just wanted to mention one more thing that I don't think has been discussed yet, that I just wanted to make sure that I introduced to the audience. So in our Monash environment, our outreach and engagement isn't actually a service. It's not a function that delivers a service or a product to our users. But it's vital and integral to other parts of the user journey. So the university, that journey begins with becoming aware of a service. Then there's the service itself. Then there's the after part, the feedback, suggestions. And where the library business partners and some others like our comms staff are really needed and deeply embedded is in the awareness and in the feedback side. So I guess it's important also to note that at the same time that we've been undergoing this change in roles and in the library around outreach and engagement, we've also been thinking about our services in quite a different way and thinking about the before, during, and after. So that's one of the things our library business partners have been talking a lot about.
That's helpful, Eva. Thank you. I think when we've all spoken previously, all of the roles have sort of slightly different remits in terms of whether they are sort of 100% focused on engagement work or are they involved in more business as usual type work. So for example, the engagement librarians in my team are also responding to tickets and doing research consultations and live chat. So they have that sort of frontline client experience, but then there's also the relationship building and the connection and the it's really interesting to hear everybody talk about events and committees as being such a valuable way to connect in with the faculty as well, just that visibility at those events. I can see a couple of questions trickling in. So what I might do is ask everybody, I might ask the panel one last question to make sure that we've got time. And if anybody in the audience would like to drop in a question, please do use that Q&A feature. So my last question for the panel is, what advice would you give to other academic libraries looking to strengthen their partnerships with faculties and other stakeholders.
I'm happy to go, Jo.
Great, thank you.
I guess what you've probably picked up on, I hope you've picked up on throughout this webinar, is that each institution has approached it quite differently. And I do think it is worthwhile, if you're considering going down sort of an outreach and engagement model approach, really taking the time to think about what it is that you need for your institution. So within the Deakin environment, we landed on these 3 very strategic roles. Like I said at the very beginning, it doesn't mean we don't have a whole host of other forms of engagement that happen. We have our scholarly services librarians, we have our client experience librarians, our directors, our open ed librarians, research librarians, and so on, all doing engagement work. But in terms of what we kind of realised we needed, something that was missing was that strategic link, that strategic and tactical link versus the kind of tactical and operational link that those other engagement roles might provide us with. So I think my advice would be to sit down and really think about what it is that you need. What are you trying to achieve? And are you looking for more strategic senior roles to drive that engagement, or is this something that would be better placed in roles that are, like you were saying in your model, Jo, working more operationally as well? So I would encourage people to think about it, because there are lots of different ways of approaching engagement models in libraries.
Thank you, Danielle. Loretta.
Yeah, I agree. And I think it's important to set up staff for success. So something I probably should have answered with that last question about how to support staff. We provide a lot of leadership training to our outreach librarian group. We gave them access to coaching as well, which was quite valuable. So I think it's encouraging the development of a self-directed team who share ideas and share their successes, that gives them learning opportunities with each other. So our group will run their own meetings, they chair them, they bring the items to the agenda. Managers do not attend those meetings. So they've really been given that autonomy to lead the way and to work together to build their skills to be able to engage with faculty effectively.
Thank you, Loretta. Gary and Eva, do you have advice you'd like to share before we get to questions?
I guess I'd just urge libraries to think about this outreach and engagement area very explicitly, and to have a consistent and strategic approach to this with a clear line of sight on that area. To be clear about what you're wanting to achieve and what the drivers of change are. So we've spoken a little bit about that within the outreach and engagement area around the library alignment with the priorities of the university and taking that library vision out to the university. And I guess I'd be, I'm really focused on also bringing those insights around outreach and engagement into senior leadership team discussion. So it's thought about at the highest levels of the library. And I think Eva has, similar to Loretta, a focus on setting up staff for success, and she can probably say a couple of words about that. Eva.
Yeah, I think Loretta did a really, really good job of describing that, setting up staff for success. Not only your library business partners or those engagement staff, but make sure that those roles are widely understood within the library, especially if you're moving into quite a different model. The rest of the staff might be wondering, what do those staff do all day long, and are they doing my job, and how do I work with that crowd of library business partners? I also think that in order to do that, you have to think about not only that formal, how people, go to committees and what happens at the committees, but also build those informal bridges, however the culture is in your own in your own establishment, because the culture of those informal bridges is really, really critical. And I think not only empowering the library business partners to get out into the faculties and into the university and, do their role, just get stuck in and learn as you go, part of that, but also feel free to go out and connect up with other teams within the environment as well. Because it's the setting up for success really covers a whole of library success for those roles.
Thank you, Eva, and thank you everybody for sharing those useful pieces of advice. I'm going to switch to the questions. Thank you to everybody who's posted questions. And I'm going to start with quite a practical question for Monash, and it's selfishly because I would like to know the answer to this as well. Could you answer or speak to what work experience do business partners without library experience have, and what benefit does this bring to the role?
I could answer that, Joe. So our when we recruited our library business partners, I guess we were looking for individuals that had quite a good grasp, not specifically and only of the library environment, but of the higher education environment, and what were the big drivers of what was happening in universities and in the academic environment. So I think we were looking for people who might have had experience in other outreach and engagement roles, maybe not in the sector, so in public libraries or in other environments, NGOs and so on and so forth. And we were looking for individuals with excellent, deep, and I guess really powerful histories of building really good relationships. So those were the kind of things that we searched for. So I guess everybody who got, you can talk to the library business partners themselves. The last thing I want to mention is that we were also looking for individuals who really worked well in a team. And I think this harkens back to things that both Loretta and Danielle were talking about. So it isn't only the individuals who are business partners individually in faculties, but it's how they work together, leverage each other's strengths and skills, build what's going on with one into another area. So we wanted people who are quite good sharers and communicators in the team as well.
That's great.
Did that answer your question, Joe? Did that answer the question?
Yes, thank you. Yeah, it did. I'll just use very quickly, I'll ask the panel just if you can answer this. I think this is sort of a perennial problem or challenge in engagement models, is how we measure the success of relationship building and impact. Is there any way, could anybody speak to that, of how they're approaching that?
Yes, I think I had this as my number one of my top two pain points is how do you measure impact? Like, what does that even look like? And it's still something we struggle with. And I think I think there is a high level of qualitative measure that needs to go into it. Expert opinion. So when you're getting that feedback from faculties and colleagues that across the institution that partners work with, that this has been successful, you've kind of got to take expert opinion as that form of measure. It's really hard to have numbers, and I would caution against trying to associate quantitative numbers against these types of engagement roles. It's a very challenging thing to do. Number of successful workshops as a result of an engagement. It's not necessarily measuring true impact. So yeah, I don't have an answer for it, except I think leaning into the qualitative side of measuring and thinking about narratives and bringing that back into senior leadership decision making around those roles and the success of them.
I might just add, just to sort of close it out, that I agree it's very hard to quantitatively measure any individual relationship or connection, but something that we've that's been helpful in our setting is getting feedback from other colleagues, whether that's senior library leadership or other teams, about, oh, that was so useful that you found that out and you were able to share that with us, and we've taken that information, and maybe it's not a transformative change that they've made, but it's been helpful for them to know in the work that they do day to day. So it's that qualitative feedback from your team surrounding you as well that I think is really helpful. We've just hit time here, so I'll take this opportunity to thank everybody who logged on for the session today. I really appreciate you making the time to attend and listen. And again, thank you to anybody who has watched the recording. A very special thank you to our speakers for being willing to share your time and your experiences about how you're building engagement models at your institution. So thank you to Gary, Eva, Danielle and Loretta, and again to Julie, who wasn't able to join us but did help us shape the presentation. And a big thank you to Joel and Phoebe for your technical support today. Thank you, everybody, and enjoy the rest of your day.